Um, my name is Barb Greene, and you'll get to hear a little bit more about that as we move through our presentation today. I just wanted to say that here's the big disclaimer. I'm new to Zoom, don't always understand the mechanics of Zoom, and so I'm going to do my very, very best to make this as smooth as possible. I've enlisted Michelle as my partner in crime to help with some of the things that I may be a little rusty on and to watch the chat box for me. As you were coming on this morning, I see some Kentucky faces, which is wonderful to see some of our Kentucky peeps in here. So, and then I see a lot of other faces. So what we're going to be talking about today, this whole session is really based on the whole notion of lived experience being valued and credible, not just in terms of what we do, but as a career and not just a job. So that's kind of how our material is going to roll out. Hopefully we're going to be talking to maybe some peer support people themselves or people who have lived experience, but also many of you, some of you may actually be employers of peer support. So we took some time, my partner in crime back here in Kentucky, Carol Cecil and I, and we really looked at that based on our experience over the past years with peer support and what it looks like, when it looks, when it works, when it don't, what some of the barriers are, opportunities that folks with lived experience need to grow and maybe move up a sort of a ladder. And we're looking at it from the customer to the actual program director for peer support. So, we really would like to hear from you all. And Michelle, thank you. She kind of got us started in a way. If you could put in the chat box, what is your role in behavioral health? Are you a clinician? Are you a case manager? Are you a peer support specialist? Are you a program administrator? So let's look at who we are talking with today. So definitely a lot of folks come from peer support or supervising peer support. I'm so glad you're with us today. And then we have some parent partners, which I'm assuming is probably what we call peer support down here in Kentucky. An educational advocate, peer support specialist, peer support partner trainer, was a clinician, now an advocate. I'll bet that's an interesting story. I'd love to hear at some point. A consumer, a parent representative, peer support, family support partner, peer support, a peer supporter working at a children's hospital. So parents, executive director of a consumer-run organization, parent with lived experience, executive director at Reach In from Phoenix, peer support specialist trainer, instructor, special needs advocate. So I feel like I am among my peeps. I don't know, some people don't know what I'm saying when I'm saying that. I'm just saying my people. So my tribe, if you will. So let's look at what we hope to accomplish in the time that we're together today. So some folks call these learning objectives, and that's what they're officially called. I tend to think of them as discoveries. And so some of the discoveries that we hope that we have together is really kind of looking at what is the infrastructure models that really foster opportunities for employee growth, recognition of their expertise, and actually retention of families support providers. How to integrate family peer support service with other existing staff within the different agencies who employ them. Increasing our knowledge of what a career path for peer support might be, rather than at least what we've seen here in Kentucky, which is a sort of a stagnant position. And then to kind of look at what are some of those steps in that journey, beginning with receiving support to actually taking peer support on as a career. So here's the journey as we see it. And that journey is really about being a customer. And I use the term customer. In Kentucky, many of us, at least from our family organization, have began to talk about what people call consumers or clients, into understanding that these are really customers of services with all the rights and responsibilities of customers of any service. And so we intentionally use the word customer on up to, and a customer is really someone who's receiving service. This is a point of entry for many, many, many peer support providers. And there's, at that point, we're trying to be very sensitive of their needs, of their history. They're there because they're seeking services of some sort, and being sensitive to their background experiences. And we do a lot of things in Kentucky around understanding values and understanding the difference in values. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute, because there are hidden rules. There are hidden rules that our cultures have. So we will talk about that for just a minute later on in our presentation today. And then the emerging leader, which is that individual who gets services, feels some sense of passion about assisting someone else to be able to have services that really work for them, or an empowering experience for their families. At this point, we really hope at this emerging leader point, the integral piece is to begin to look beyond themselves, them and theirs, to really being able to apply what they've learned towards somebody else's journey. In the practicing leader, which is that is a very, we feel is a very kind of lively place, and that's that safe place to begin to practice peer support or leadership, and to begin to start reaching out to other folks. And then, and in newly certified, one of the things that KPFC does, and I've seen some other folks on here also do, is we provide certification for family and youth peer support. And then I provide some adult certification for a behavioral health agency here in Kentucky. But that's the place in which a customer really kind of sees a purpose, and they start thinking about utilizing their voice, their power, if you will, to empower others to maybe start the journey in their leadership. And then, of course, we have the experienced peer support specialists. And I think years ago, I might have said the older peer support specialist, but as I turned 70 this year, I don't use that word anymore. So I really say these are the people who've been around a minute and have some expertise that they have collected along the way, and are providing, and really maybe even unofficially helping coach some of the other people along the way. Then a regional coach. A regional coach is that individual that is recognized by the employer, the agency who is employing them, as having a set of skills that other people can really benefit from. And how we've seen this get played out, and our vision around this is that some of the, at this point, these regional peer support coaches are really, really coaching and helping people do skill development and some analysis shift, because depending on what your experiences are, sometimes there needs to be a shift in our own analysis. And it really beginning with the customer level. And then, of course, a peer support director. And in the state of Kentucky, those folks have often been folks who have a degree, or clinical, a clinical degree, or some sort of licensure, if you will. They require a licensure to sign off on the notes where billing can happen. In Kentucky, peer support is billable, but you're billing under the licensure of someone else. And I suspect that's true for a lot of other states also. And so there's this overlay of billing. When we're talking about a peer support director, we're talking about someone who is there not because of a degree or an education. They are an accomplished peer support individual who has a lot of experience in history. And we're talking about someone who is equal to all of the other program directors within a behavioral health agency. So they're no longer just giving input. They have equal weight with all other program directors within that agency. So that's sort of what we're talking about. And I wanted to give you, just a little bit of background, because I am one of those individuals who really went through that ladder. And so, boy, did I learn some stuff. And boy, did I learn what I didn't know. And boy, have I surfaced more questions than I have answers. So, but for me, I started as a customer of behavioral health services, and I didn't wake up one day and say, oh, I think my family needs some behavioral health services. It was a forced choice for me. I had lots of involvement with a lot of different agencies who were trying to assist my family in becoming successful, more functional, all sorts of things they had in mind, visions they had in mind for me. I come from a social justice background, and so I brought that with me. And I had a lot of negative participation with the agency. And I did have a very strong voice. And I think, you know, you're listening to me today. You can tell that I don't mind speaking loud. And so I had a lot of negative participation within the system of care, and within the different agencies, and was probably regarded as one of their most non-compliant, Mad Mother Incorporated, all of those labels that some of us get. But I was dedicated to participating to get the services that my family needed, whatever that took. So as an emerging leader, then I really, believe it or not, was actually hired. Lots of folks couldn't believe that. Neither could I at first. But that was a pivotal moment in my growth as an individual with lived experience. And it put me on a team. I had never understood a team process in behavioral health before. I know we say that we have teams, we have treatment teams, we have recovery teams, we have all these teams, but I had never really experienced what a team looked like until that point. That was way back in 2000. And we were called family liaisons based on a Robert Wood Johnson grant that our state received, that called for a parent to participate equally on a team. We were located in the schools, and so you can only imagine what kind of issues and barriers might have surfaced in the context of that arrangement. And then I was actually hired within Kentucky's family organization. So back in 2006, I was hired by Kentucky Partnership for Families and Children to look at this whole notion of what this position was and what is peer support and how do we get it recognized and how do we help people value it, because there didn't seem to be a lot of value. And I will tell you, along the way, I heard some things that I still find quite disturbing when people are hiring peer support and they're looking for people like them. We want to hire someone who kind of like us. And we bring something different and something unique. So hopefully they're not out there hiring people like them. Hopefully they're out there hiring people like you. In 2007, I was a co-creator of the certification program for the state of Kentucky. And by virtue of having created that program, became a certified family peer support specialist. So I was bouncing back and forth between my local mental health agency, behavioral health agency, down in the mountains in Kentucky, in southern Kentucky, and also working out of Kentucky Partnership for Families and Children, our statewide family organization, also. So I was contracted by the local behavioral health organization to kind of be that coach, to kind of assist some of those emerging lived experience individuals who wanted to move further in doing peer support. And then all of a sudden, I was hired. I was actually hired, and that was the peer support director. I was actually hired by that local behavioral health agency to be the peer support program director. And that was within a community mental health center. That had never been done before. So, one, I was quite full of myself. And two, I wasn't really sure what that meant or what I needed to be doing. But I learned a ton of stuff along the way. I am currently back at Kentucky Partnership for Families and Children. And we now have developed 6 peer support centers throughout our state. Talk more about that later, but are now partnering with that very same agency. And so it's been an amazing journey, and we have been blessed to have some really amazing partnerships, primarily with the community mental health centers. So that's a little bit about my journey. So how did all that happen? You got to ask yourself, how do you work through that? What has to be in place? And so we want to talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that's an absolute must, that absolutely has to be in place, is an infrastructure. an infrastructure which will accommodate. So we only have the resources that we have. And peer support, those of you who do peer support or employ peer support, I don't know about your state, but in Kentucky, the billing rate for peer support is a pittance. It does not value the work, nor the individual. And so we have had a lot of turnover in peer support. We have had many people go on to get their degrees in a particular field so that they can kind of move up in the world, if you will, to have a career. And, you know, us at Kentucky Partnership for Families and Children are saying, that's not what we really promote. It's wonderful if people decide that's what they want to do. But if peer support feels like that is the only way they can move through a career ladder, then we have a problem. And we're not really valuing that role as much as we value some of the other roles. So we're advocating, we are advocating several things. One is to really have folks really look at what sort of infrastructure do you really need to promote peer support as a career ladder rather than a job temporary. And we have taken, and I don't know, again, I don't know about other states, I only know about Kentucky. We've lost a lot of our peer support folks because they can't maintain on the salaries that have been given to them. And it's kind of hard to feel like this is my field, but I can't go anywhere with it. So I'm stuck here always. So infrastructure is critical. And so we really kind of have taken some time to look at what kind of infrastructure we think needs to be in place in order for peer support to move from a job to a career. And what are the strategies for intentionally growing the leadership, both of the peer support specialists, but also of those who walk beside us and partner with us? And what are the policies and procedures that really kind of need to be in place or looked at in order for us to be successful? What are some of the barriers that are out there that we have traditionally struggled with and will continue to struggle with? And then also, I'm sorry, in case one of the things I didn't tell you was that I rescue dogs, and apparently they're all excited about something going on out there. And then what is the litmus test? How do you know when someone is ready to move from one place to another in their career? So we don't have degrees. You know, with degreed folks, you can get an additional certification, an additional degree, and it opens doors for you. Traditionally, that has not been true with peer support. And so we're saying we need to recognize that, and we need to do something about that. And I see a lot of people are agreeing that intentional growth of leadership is important. All right, so let's look at this. We're going to look at this from several different levels. And if I'm running too fast, Michelle, please let me know, because I can get in the pulpit about this, because I'm very passionate about today's discussion. So let's look at the customer. You might have heard client, consumer. Let's look at them. How would we know that they were really ready to do anything besides receive services for their families? Well, one of the ways we're going to know is that they're getting more comfortable with their voice and not just complaining, but they have an authentic voice. When I say authentic, I mean it's educated, it's informed, it's real. They're able to speak about what they need for the families. The days would be over if we could all get our customers to this place where they said, stop telling me what my family needs and give me what options you have. And I'll tell you the services that I think would help me and my family. Flip the script on how decisions are even made about services for families and youth and adults. And then, of course, the person, based on that experience, if we have provided an experience that allows them and empowers them to come to a comfortable, authentic voice, many times what we have seen is there's a desire, and it depends, you know, and I am not in judgment of anybody's thinking about how things occur to people, but I know for me, it was a calling. I could no longer just be satisfied with what I could get done for my family. I wanted other people to have a piece of the action. And so I knew I needed to start giving back to those who were coming, sitting around me or coming after me. And then, of course, the customer would need to be open to feedback. So if you can say, and folks did for me, say, no, Barb, not sure slapping the superintendent of schools is going to get you where you want to be. And I'm not sure what's going to happen to those parents who come behind you because you slapped him. I was able to hear that and say, oh, well, slapping the superintendent may not have been the best advocacy strategy. Let me think about some other things I could have done. And so then providing those opportunities. So being able to recognize and utilize the customer's skills. For me, one of my skills was I was not afraid to talk. I was not afraid to talk. If you wanted me to speak, you just make me angry. You make me feel like something is unjust, and you have my thoughts, whether you welcome them or not. That's where I was. So I had a lot of passion. I was willing to speak my truth. So then having an environment that's a safe place for people to learn and grow. All too often, and I've seen this happen, and it happened in Kentucky. And now let me just say, Kentucky has done some amazing things. And when I go other places, I look around and I'm going, oh my gosh, Kentucky's way ahead of people in some ways, but in other ways, maybe not so much. So I needed a safe place, and our peer support people, they need a safe place to practice their voice, to begin to grow some of those skills. And then we need to look at, so what are the barriers for a customer for this level? Well, at this level, when you're a customer, you may not have a lot of time. You're not working as peer support. You are surviving with your family somehow, and you may not have a lot of time. You may not have a lot of resources. That was certainly true from my family's perspective. We come from the culture of generational poverty, and we spent a lot of time scavenging for resources. And we come from the mountains, and so that, you know, we were real resource scavengers. And lacking confidence. Believe it or not, there was a point when if you made me angry, I would speak, and I would speak loudly. But if I was trying to work with someone, I was embarrassed to be on the telephone with somebody listening. So I needed a safe place to be able to grow those abilities. And I needed somebody invested in my growth. And so some agencies are very limited options that customers can participate in. And I know we say within the system of care, everybody's producing these options. Well, the truth is some folks don't know what those options are. And some agencies may feel quite restricted in what options they can provide. And then, of course, policies and procedures. And for many years in the state of Kentucky, as a parent representative of a local regional interagency council, because they decided that we needed to have a voice in that. Not everybody understands the policies, and the policies may not really be designed to look at how to really incorporate lived experience. The agency, if they don't have someone with lived experience already there, needs to be open to provide the kind of coaching and mentoring that it takes for a customer's leadership to grow. You need a champion. Well, you really need more than one, but you need a champion who will risk and say to those folks who are making the decisions, this needs to happen. Someone who can champion your way. And someone said, most can't reach professionally peer support, understands, has an approach you can't read to learn or master. Yes. Spirit prepared me for battle of my life and understand my traumas or heal myself, peer support, relatability. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So those are the things at a customer level. Now, there are plenty of other things, but these are some of the key ingredients. And these are the things we need to be looking at and trying to riddle through while someone is even being a customer. Recently, well, a lot of times we're asked, because really the system of care sort of mandates a person who has lived experience being part of a committee or being part of a conversation. And they really are looking that way. They really are looking that way. But oftentimes, we're really not sure what to start. We're really not sure what to offer. We haven't had a good way to really look at, how do we know this person is ready? How do we know that Barb Greene could come to a meeting like that and not cuss everybody out because she could do that? How do we know that? And so a lot of deliberate thinking needs to go into, what do we need to do to move Danita from just being a customer to really starting a leadership journey? And these are some of the things that we think need to be in place. Okay, so let's talk about this emerging leader. So how do we know someone might be ready? If an individual recognizes that they actually have a need in themselves to embark on their own leadership journey, seriously, now we're moving from someone who moves from me and mine, getting what I can, sense of entitlement. Many of us came from there, particularly if there was scarcity in our resources, or our need, if our needs had not traditionally been addressed. Need to recognize a need. I need to be on this journey. I'm being, I don't know what you call it. I'm being called upon somehow, some way. Something is telling me that I need to be on a leadership journey. And then the other key ingredient in this emerging leader is the ability to go from me and mine to actually thinking about the bigger picture. And in Kentucky, one of the big things that we have noticed is we have deliberately held 2 meetings a year, and they were for parent, youth, and adult leaders. Some of them hired, some of them maybe a representative of some sort, and some of them who just came through a leadership academy and said, I want to be part of something bigger. And they are all part of our movement here in Kentucky. And so we were able to look very quickly, and we designed what we call a Kentucky Family Leadership Academy, which was a very simple leadership academy that just brought folks together and having what we call, depending on who you are, some folks call it courageous conversations. Some of us call it dangerous discussions, and really start looking inward at ourselves. And then an opportunity to really have those people not just talking to you, but to really talking to other folks, and participating with them to start experiencing and garnering a unified voice around something broader than just themselves. And then, of course, taking direction. That's the other thing, allowing them an opportunity to give a voice that people will take direction from. Because just asking for people's input and just putting them on a committee, just allowing them to come together and share is not the opportunity that we're talking about. We're talking about really listening. And so at Kentucky Partnership for Families and Children, our agenda actually grows out of that ground voice. That's who we need to be representing. And then what are the barriers? What are the barriers to that? Do people have time to really participate at this level? For us, do they have the car to get there? Do they have somebody to watch the kids long enough for them to come? Or if they're a caretaker in another role? As always, and as we have been told, we experience triggers. So how does that, or how could that affect our own recovery journey while we're really trying to work for the benefit of not just us? So those have been some of the key barriers in the state of Kentucky. So what are the policies and procedures that need to be in place? Yes, Melissa, we do actually. Pre-COVID and post-COVID, those are in person, and we actually raise money each year, and we bring folks together 2 times a year, maybe at a state park or something, is how we have done that. And they are extremely powerful. So, and then policies and procedures that need to be in place. How do you allow someone? How do they, what do you have in place that allows them to really be able to participate? Can you pay for gas? Or give gas cards? Or mileage? Can you give them a stipend for their participation? Or help them with their childcare needs? And is there a formalized coaching process that assists people in building those leadership skills? Now, everybody has processes. And when I'm talking about formalized, I'm really talking about across the board formalized. Each individual agency could have their own formalized process, but I'm talking about something bigger, even bigger than that, that helps promote a more unified voice and infrastructure. Okay. So now let's look at these practicing leaders. So let's look at the readiness of maybe a practicing leader. Are they really able to really look at how their message really affects other people? Can they do that? Do they have an awareness about the responsibility of putting a message out and how that affects others? Are they becoming more aware and maybe more practiced at some of the professional etiquettes that have to be in place? I'm going to put that in plain language, okay? So do they have the ability to get in the sandbox and share the toys? Are they able to speak with respect? Do they honor process? Are they able to focus on issues and not people? These are some of the readiness that we look for. And if it's not there, begin to try to hone in on. Now, what are some of the opportunities? Maybe taking on a more significant leadership role. Okay, that in itself is not happening as much as it should be from our perspective. So they're moving from just being on a committee and talking to maybe chairing some of these committees, to maybe taking on a leadership role. Are trainings becoming more formalized? Is there a plan in place that really helps them look inward and be able to tease out some of the additional skills that they need to move forward as a leader? Are they being provided a fair mirror for where they're at in their leadership? Barriers, and my gosh, and I know our state's not the only one to see this, that star syndrome. And we have lost a lot of peer supporters throughout the years because when you move from feeling like absolutely powerless to feeling very powerful, that can often become very intoxicating. And it's not just us. It's leaders, period. And so if you're not able to kind of move from that, oh my gosh, I have this power, to the next level of, oh my gosh, I need to share this power, many people might get stuck there. And then they get separated from the others, the other leaders, or there's a lot of misperceptions that go on. And then, of course, do they have that ability to honestly self-evaluate? It's real easy to talk about other people's leadership and their needs. Are they able to look at their own mirror for themselves and be able to say, you know, that's really not my strength. I think I'm going to need that skill. And then, of course, at that point, there's also a lot of role confusion that can happen. So, for example, one of the things that often can happen, and I remember plain as day, back when I first started doing peer support, and I showed up at the same house as a case manager was at, and we had not discussed my going there. And she was like, what are you doing here? I'm the one that's supposed to be doing these home visits. It's my job to help him navigate services. And so, you know, fortunately for us, we were able to kind of look back and now look back on that and going, I don't know what all the confusion was about, but there is role confusion because many of our partners, they do not understand lived experience the same way we do. They do not understand the role of lived experience. And so for them, I remember a lot of like case managers, when peer support became billable back in 2014, they weren't really sure what that meant. And many people felt threatened for their own jobs. Oh, so now they're going to do case management. So there is a lot of, and it's not just on the part of the professionals, but I'm just will say to you for myself, if I'm going to throw anybody under the bus today, it's going to be me. There were times when someone would say to me, well, they diagnosed him with bipolar, but I don't really think he's bipolar. I think, and I'm like, well, let me tell you what, he has the same symptoms as my kid, and my kid was ADHD. So he's ADHD. Don't let him tell you any better or any different from that. So it was also us who did not have a understanding of what our lane in the road really looked like. So that is a barrier. Everybody on the same page, understanding what roles are going to get played. The difficult part for the state of Kentucky is it really depended on who you worked for, what your role was. And that may be true in other states as well. There was just a lot of confusion about what that was supposed to look like. And then, of course, policies and procedures around that. And one of the policies and procedures that we really promote is that there should be mandated, formalized, lived experience input on any of the agency committees. There should be a universal role description, and there should be accountability set in place in policy for the customer or the volunteer or the professionals involved with them. Okay. So now you're certified. So now you've come and you've gone through, you've learned, you've gotten excited, you're turned on about helping other people. You're really starting to look at yourself and your own needs and how you can, you become a little more humble in your own self-image, and you become certified. Now, I don't know about other states, but in the state of Kentucky for KPFC, we take this very seriously. And so our trainings are very rigorous certification trainings. They currently require that you have gone through that leadership academy and gotten some of those basic skills and tested out of, and that you come to a 5-day, very rigorous training, which you test out of every day, because it does not require a degree. We need to ensure that people have the competencies they need in order to do this job well, and in order to represent lived experience well. And so not only do they have to be able to really look at their lived experience and how that could be used to benefit someone else, but they also need to recognize whoever their partner is also has policies and procedures. And if you're hired and becoming an employee of those, then you'll need to be paying attention to those policies and procedures. Oftentimes, what we've seen originally when peer support first became billable, family and youth, at least in Kentucky in 14, is there was a lot of talk about peer support and the need for peer support and how everybody needed to be hiring peer support providers. And this is a very critical stage for a newly certified peer support specialist from our perspective. So we're saying never, ever, ever should someone be thrown out there to just do peer support based on a competency training. They should have shadowed someone, particularly someone who you think really has the sufficient skills to really model what that really should be looking at, what it should look like. They should need consistent coaching and structured supervision that can make a difference. And what we have witnessed is it has made a big difference. Those who have had an opportunity to shadow others and have that consistent coaching structure and supervision, it has made a difference in how they have grown and developed in their position. Now, you all probably also have heard a lot of criticism, if you will, about trying to utilize lived experience staff and some of the nightmares that people have experienced with that. Well, we have heard those also. And we think that a lot of that really came from a lack of opportunity for good supervision and coaching at this very critical stage, the newly certified stage. Now, some of the barriers is transition is challenging. Many of us, you know, we up the ante when we hire a peer support person or a lived experience person. So before, it was more about them providing their voice and their opinions. And now it's not about your opinions when you're working with customers. You don't get to have one. And so it's really about helping customers articulate their opinions. And so moving from that transition of, oh, before I got certified, I could say what I thought based on my family. Now, we're not in that place anymore. You are a certified peer support specialist, and you are a paid employee, or even if you're not paid, if you're volunteering, those expectations have changed of how you interact with folks. So one of the barriers is truly, and I don't know about other places, but based on our experiences, peer support is not equally valued with the other roles. It's not. It's not. And we are constantly in what we think is an unfair position of always being looked at so carefully, and people just kind of waiting for something to happen, so that, you know, they can help folks understand that peer support, it's not the same. It's kind of an add-on, if you will, to all of the other services and supports that are provided. And it's nice. And we've gotten a lot of people have patted us on the head. Oh, it's so nice you're willing to share your journey. So not valued equally, not being seen as an equal member on a team, not being our voice not being recognized equally, in terms of assisting families. Now, when we start talking about policies and procedures here, we need to be really careful. And this is one of the things that we have discovered, is that oftentimes, because peer support has been touted, because peer support has the ability to bill, because they really feel like they're being forced in the sandbox to play with us, they develop a tolerance. And that tolerance really gets played out in a way that actually is negative for peer support. You know, oh, well, they're acting some sort of way, you know, and they do have, this is a person who has a disability, they have a diagnosis. So I guess we need to just, you know, suck it up or make allowances for, or whatever those things may be. And when we're talking about a professional peer support specialist, that is not what we're talking about. There needs to be mutual accountability. I got into one of the biggest arguments that I had been in the last 10 years with a person I was working with who was an admin, who I was trying to, we were having a conversation about what needed to be happening for my peer support program, what I felt, and I was advocating for what I thought they needed. And what I was told while I was on the phone, because I was saying, you know, we need to stop looking at peer support like they're people who are just managing their symptoms, and start looking at them as people who are in recovery. And she got a phone call and she said, oh, okay, yes, that would be fine for her to have a mental health day. And I said, excuse me, was that a clinician you were referring to? And she said, well, yes, they need mental health days. And I said, oh, so if one of your clinicians is having a bad day, they need a mental health day. But if a peer support specialist is having a bad day, we're displaying symptoms. So calling that double standard out, and she was someone that I had an agreement with that I could do that, or I would not have approached it that way, really assisted us in looking at, you know, all staff need a wellness plan. All staff need to have access to the same accountability and mercies within an agency. So it allowed us to really start thinking about not just how we supervise and support peer support, but how we do that staff-wide through a whole agency. Huge, and it went into policy. Huge. That was huge. And then, of course, formalizing some of these structures within an agency. It becoming a regulation of that agency. So Beverly says she's learned to make her seat at the table count. Okay. I don't know. Y'all have to help me. Michelle, you're probably going to have to help me with breaks and stuff, because, you know, I just get carried away.
We're carried away with you, Barb. You just tell us what you need and we'll do whatever. But you can do whatever break you want for however long you want. How's that? I'm empowering you to do that.
Oh, wow. Thank you. You might regret that. So, experienced peer support specialist. Readiness. By this time, they should be much more grounded in the philosophy of a system of care. They should be, They must be able to distinguish what it looks like, how it works, what it's made up of, who are the players. They should know these things. They should be participating in system of care principles. They should have a much greater clarity about what is the big picture that we're really looking at for lived experience. Is it this job? Is it even this career? Because we contend, no, it is about those things. It includes those things, but it's so much bigger. It's so much bigger than that. It's about a customer or consumer or family and youth movement, and not just here in the state of Kentucky, but really the vision of the Federation itself, and really a movement based on lived experience that guides the experiences people have, customers have within behavioral health. And when I say behavioral health, I'm talking about substance use also. Different states kind of tease out this or that, but it's all encompassing when I speak to it. I wanted to just help you all understand that. So, and understand the value. And it should be a reciprocal respect that they have. Lived experience and provider knowledge-based providers. Now they need a seat at the table that develops, manages, evaluates program level decisioning. Not just asking me for my opinion anymore. Not be giving me something to look at and critique. Be part of that think tank. They should be being utilized as a consultant with your other coworkers and other agencies about what is this thing lived experience and what have you learned from that? And how could you help us figure out how to better understand and work with the customers that we have? And that being truly valued. Now, what's in the way? Ding. In Kentucky, there is no formalized career ladder or recognition of growth and skill development. There is an unequal weight between people who have lived experience and a degree for advancement within almost any agency outside of a family organization. Policies and procedures. We need to create a salary matrix based on demonstrated competency and years of professional experience that are equal to what you would expect from someone who is degreed to provide services. Doesn't need to be on top. It needs to be equal weight given to those notions about how that can happen. Okay. Now we're looking at the level of a coach. How do you know someone's ready to really provide coaching? They have the ability not to motivate, because we don't motivate people really. We give them motivational opportunities. How they need to help know how to support someone in their growth. They need to be able to provide positive guidance for peer support specialists, for other peer support specialists. They need a high level of analysis skills. They need to be able to see these things, this data, things that are happening, and interpret them. And they need to be capable of creating and managing a budget. They need to be fiscally responsible. At this point, they need to have the ability to manage resources in a fair and equitable way, and not that, okay, so we got $800,000 to spend, we're going to go buy all this stuff, but to really manage a budget in a responsible manner. Now, they're going to have opportunities. So one of the opportunities that we can think of, just point blank, was they need to be help onboarding some of the other degreed staff within that agency. Now, there needs to be other degreed staff assisting with that, but they should be an integral piece of onboarding people. Okay? They need to attend the training levels to build their next level of leadership and coaching skills. I'll tell you, it's been very interesting for me. One of the things that KPFC has been doing in the state of Kentucky is what we call coaching trainings, where we're really looking at folks kind of looking inward at their own self. I mean, with a little more critical eye, and being able to tease out of that what they're not so good at, what is not really their gift. And at this point, we should be having the discussion about, you know, true leaders share power. That's where they should be at this level in their development. Now, what we know is that oftentimes, if you had this structure, if you had this infrastructure up until now, here's a big discovery that we've made, is that even within lived experience, oftentimes there is a pecking order. Do y'all know what I mean? I come from the country. Do you know what I mean when I say pecking order? I'm hoping you do, with someone kind of a power pyramid, if you will. So the there's a difference in the power dynamics that happens within those with lived experience, and that could be a real barrier at this level, because all of a sudden Barb Greene thinks she's all that, you know, all that, because all of a sudden she's our coach. And so, and there's a dangerous thing that happens, dangerous thing that can happen at this stage with this barrier. And that is, if we believe it, if we believe that, if we buy into that, then we're hurting everything we worked for around leadership. Or at least we think so. And recognize, there has to be a recognition, and we train this when we certify our parents. You need to recognize that there is a power differential, whether you intend for it to be or not. So the recognition of that and paying attention to that. And if that doesn't get some attention, we have seen a lot of people struggle with that. Now we're at a level where this person may not be billing for services as they once did. And so that in itself is a barrier. If you ask the CMHCs around the state of Kentucky, which one of their programs is the hardest to sustain, they're probably going to say it's peer support, because they depend on billing for many of these degreed positions that they have. And peer support is a pittance. they do not get the same return. And many of them had said, you know, at the end of the year, we have to beg for more money just to keep the peer support providers that we have, because that program is not sustainable. And I will just tell you that we think it is. We just think we need to really look at how we do that. But we need to be looking at, can we sustain this coach based on less direct services that are billed? And how? How do we do that? For one agency that I was with, they took a piece out of every grant to support the salary of the peer support person. We have to shift. There has to be a shift in job performance standards. And many of you all know what I mean. I mean, your rate of billing in Kentucky, it depends on the agency. But for many agencies, they base peer support billing on their clinical standards of billing, which is generally 50 to 60% of their time, face-to-face, in this more rigid duties that can be performed so they can be billed for. And that's not just because they're all greedy. Part of that is because they're trying to sustain, and they haven't figured out another way yet. So, and also the ability for not just a provider, but also the peer support person to be able to balance that performance versus administrative duties that comes with it. Because by this time, there is an overlay or an inlay of administrative things that this coach may need to be doing. And then, of course, there is always the policies and procedures around billing and supervision. And we've seen a lot of kickback on this. And if you look at the Medicaid reg, and they talk about billing supervision and clinical supervision, and all of that calls for a specific degree, if you will, to be able to do that. And that's a mandate. So they can't just go say, no, we don't want to do it that way. They're mandated that. That's extra time. They're having to pay for that sort of supervision. And so that can get really cloudy and it can get scary. For us, we say it needs to be a combination. That is a place where we need to be sharing supervision between the person with the degree that is needed and a lived experience individual. So we're kind of beginning to share some of that. And we need an organizational chart, and that needs to be part of the policy. And it should be, these coaches should be included on some of these mid-level management opportunities that take place. That's what we think it should look like at this level. Now let's look at here's the climb. What Miley Cyrus said, it's about the climb. And that's what we've been talking about this morning. But this may be what it looks like on top for peer support. Let's look at their readiness. Do they have expertise? Do they have the kind of expertise that allows them to participate in customer-driven policies? Are they able to be a change agent, what we call advocacy without injury? Do they have that kind of ability to move through some of those processes and structures and protocols to really be a change agent positively? Do they have a commitment to that agency's goals beyond just lived experience? And do they have the administrative skills to really pull that off? The opportunities that are needed, and this is not a complete laundry list. This is the list we put together for this presentation today. Onboard all staff to the importance and the value of peer support services. It's not an add-on. It's an integral part of everything we do. They need to have the ability to help shape policies at that very top level. Most behavioral health, well, not most, maybe that's a little overgeneralized, but many behavioral health agencies, at least community mental health agencies, are basically nonprofits. They have boards. Do they have lived experience people up there on that board? Does their lived experience staff have the same respect as the degreed staff? And there needs to be opportunities for that to happen. Are they really equal? They need to be equal with every other program director in that agency. And do they have opportunities for ongoing professional development like everyone else? Okay, so what gets in the way of this? Oftentimes, there's lots of power struggles. As a peer support director, I was once told, I'm the one that has the degree. Okay, you may know about families, but I'm the one that has a degree. So it was kind of an education showdown, if you will. I could have been just as guilty of them because I could have turned that and said, I'm the one who knows the parents. You don't. You got your good stuff out of a book. Let me tell you how it really is. Could have done that. So that kind of power struggle could happen. And that will be a barrier. And you know what? It probably will. We need to be prepared for it. And then position sustainability. There's no billing at this point. This person's not doing any billing anymore. Just like any other program director. How are we going to sustain that position? How do we do that? And how do we feel good about dedicating dollars to that the same way we dedicate dollars to every other position of that level within an agency? And then we have to maintain the focus on why we're there. And here's another thing that happens. Just like, I don't know, many folks that I've talked to, degreed folks that I've talked to, that I've been partnering with over the years, have said to me on occasion, they forgot where they came from. They don't know what's going on down here anymore. I'm a clinician here at a school and I'm doing the best I can. And I got a case of 60 kids and all I'm doing is putting out fires and I'm not really getting to the therapy that I need to do. And they don't have a clue. And that may be very true. Sadly, that could be very true. But it is the same thing with lived experience. That is a barrier. A person, when they get to this level, could get very disconnected from the ground. And so recognizing that that could be a real barrier will allow agencies to be more deliberate about how one doesn't. Excuse me, how does one not anyway? How do people who move up the ladder still stay connected to the ground? That's not just a question for peer support. That's a question that we should be asking ourselves and everybody else. How do you stay grounded? How do you stay grounded? You've got all of this infrastructure and these layers and layers and layers. How does that top layer stay grounded? And lived experience is no different. So we have to deliberately see that as a barrier and riddle what to do. And then, of course, that ladder that career ladder needs to be officially adopted into regulation. Not just it's the right thing to do, but here is the regulation that specifies that. And lived experience needs to be embedded in all of that. There should be quality improvement expectations. Every behavioral health agency I know has quality improvement folks who are always looking for quality improvement. That needs to be true for peer support. The same. And peer support career path employees would have efficacy. There would be some job performance standards, but those standards would not just be about billing. It would be also about, are they meeting these benchmarks for these different levels on that career path? So I'm going to move on to our next piece here. So let's look at this whole notion of the difference, or our thinking about the difference between a peer support job and a peer support career. And so some of these things that we've talked about is what we have learned through experiencing peer support since it became Medicaid billable back in 2014 is peer support is often a short-term job. It fulfills a business need in exchange for money. Almost always the billing is used in part, at least for sustaining that sort of a position. And when I say billing, I'm talking about insurance. We have managed care in Kentucky, and we have, of course, Medicaid here in Kentucky. And then we have private insurances here in Kentucky who may or may not pay for or honors peer support to a lesser degree. Although what we know is that the lower end services generally are more effective financially. There's low career growth, if any. So they collect money. Oftentimes what that means is what we get, this job gets put into some very rigid perimeters, which actually do the bare minimum because they're having to do at least 50 or 60% here in Kentucky in order to maintain their job performance standards, which really defines whether or not they keep their job. Kind of leaving work unsatisfied, feeling like that the value of your work, people are uninterested in it. And many of them are always looking for a new job. And there's just not enough time in the day when we look at it as a job. Those of you all who have done peer support know that you don't go home and not think about what's going on. You don't have that luxury, really. And it becomes a daily grind. If we look at it in terms of a career, then we could look at it as a long-term occupation. Part of a lifelong ambition for a more professionalized salary, opportunity for professional and personal growth, all the experience that's being gained. People are more willing to go above and beyond if it's toward a career. There seems to be people are much more happy and are more motivated to do that job. It aligns with the company's values. People look forward to moving up the ladder. Your days are more meaningful and fulfilling. And we tend to think about it as that career ladder for many families with lived experience. When I say families, I'm talking about the adult, the parent, the youth. It becomes more of a journey, a personal journey. So that's how we see the differences between the job, peer support as a job, and peer support as a career. Now, if that looks different in some other state, boy, we sure want to know that. Okay, so here's a quick history lesson. So before it became Medicaid billable, peer support, whatever they called it, was minimum wage. It was just consistently a minimum wage. Many times it could be look very similar to working in the food service industry, if you will. That's an example where a lot of times it was just a part-time job. There were no benefits really to speak of. It was often peer support in the beginning was utilized as yeah, right, Lori, no tips. Often it was utilized as support staff. So we found that a lot of our peer support providers were really being used in a clerical position or a receptionist position, some sort of a support staff position. There was very limited use.
Y'all want to buy my mother-in-law's house?
What tips bought your mother-in-law's house? I think I'm hearing part of a different conversation. So there was very limited use of people with lived experience around how to engage families. And the role certainly was not equally valued. Some of the things that we know is that peer support it's difficult to sustain those positions if we want to look at it as a career. There is no real clear path for peer support and many times no opportunity for advancement. We feel like lived experience is underutilized or in some cases not utilized. And it becomes an us and them. People who have lived experience versus college degrees instead of a partnership. And then this continued role confusion about whose job is what. After it became Medicaid billable, it was still a limited wage. Or I'm speaking per our experience. There was a mandate that peer support be recognized as a team member. That happened because it was mandated. Services were billing driven, and that agencies actually lose money due to Medicaid reimbursement rates being so low. And then, of course, coworkers often feel threatened by this position. Okay. So if you were an agency and if you were entertaining the notion of peer support, a career as a career, we have to then look at some of the agencies, including ourselves, those of us who come from family agencies. Top decision makers believe it really can be a career. And there is a willingness to make a financial investment in that notion. Which might mean you look differently at how you currently acquire money and support positions within your agency. We need to pay a lot of attention, and there needs to be attention paid to workforce development. So creating champions within our agencies based on people who do have some lived experience, and providing opportunities for skill development. And I'm talking about deliberate, intentional opportunities, not just understanding a particular program or a particular service. There needs to be a plan for recruitment of folks with lived experience. There needs to be a hiring process that is more appropriate for hiring someone with a lived experience. And by that, I'm talking about we need to change up a little bit about who is doing the hiring, who has say-so, what causes someone to be good employee material and what doesn't. For many of the agencies, when we started this back a few years ago, what kept getting in the way and what we were told is, oh, it's almost impossible to hire someone with lived experience because things come back on their background checks. Well, no, duh. Lived experience means lived experience, and oftentimes what that means is things have happened in their lives. There have been some bumps. So let's look at what would disqualify someone as opposed to what does qualify someone. And there needs to really be a living wage. I will tell you, and I love the different, I've worked in nonprofits most of my life, even the ones that I was doing social justice within. I love them, and I have gained so much. And some of the things I gained that money can't buy. But I have never made a living wage until I started working for a family org who truly recognized the worth of experience equal to, and in some ways even more than, an actual degree. There will need to be deliberately need to be policies that are embedded, that are clearly defined, so that your peer support specialist workforce can advance both in title and in salary. And so never have I ever, I sound like, what's her name on TV? Never have I ever seen where there is a decent salary range for entry-level peer support. Well, there needs to be. That needs to be in policy. And folks who are hiring people, there needs to be people with lived experience in those hiring committees who has some say-so. Or that is our opinion. Okay, let's see. Supervision. There should never be someone who supervises peer support that doesn't really value it. Oftentimes people are forced. When I said earlier, if someone's billing under someone's licensure, then that's a risk that they're taking. Their licensure is on the line. And we know that's important. And so we add value to that sort of supervision. But we should also be adding value based on lived experience of that position. And so what we're really promoting is not an either or some people say either neither. We're really promoting that is a shared responsibility. That's shared leadership. Always, 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 we need to be looking at our infrastructure. Are there places? How do we guarantee that there are places for the lived experience voice? And are those really built from the customer level up? And are we including these people, not just virtue of salary, but are we including lived experience around those tables? Those ones that are making programmatic decisions and evaluating those sorts of decisions. And there needs to be some real mutual accountability. And sometimes that's where the going gets a little rough. Do we have the tools? What tools do we need in our quality improvement process? What tools do we really need to really evaluate lived experience? That's never been done. People have either been terrified to tread, to say anything about folks who have lived experience of virtue of being ostracized, or being judgmental and critical of folks with lived experience. Where's the happy medium? And that needs to be built in. What's that look like? There should be annual examinations and evaluations, but those annual evaluations, and this is just a pet peeve of mine, period, is that oftentimes they all look the same. They should not look the same. They should look different according to what role you have. And there needs to be a real channel, of weighted input. And we need to be asking ourselves as agencies, all of us, are we really listening? We're all talking about system of care values and feedbacks and principles and stuff. Are we really listening to that stuff? And how is that really getting played out? And there is a great role for your folks with lived experience. I'm telling you, customers know what worked. They know what don't work. They don't know how to do anything about it. So our infrastructure should include avenues to do something about that. And I think I was going to do a poll here. I think it's a Slido. If you don't care, let's go back and grab them if my skills will let me do that. So let me go to the next. Oh, I have to launch this one to go to the different one, I think. I don't know. It may bring up the wrong one and then I have to go back and get it, okay? So, okay. So, all right. Okay. Sorry, bear with me, you all. Okay. So let me stop sharing that. Well, I'm not really, I just think I am. Michelle, I'm not sure I know how to manipulate these various polls. My partner really wanted us to have. Hang on. Oh, here's one. Okay. All right, so I'm going to launch a poll and I'm going to try to share it, which means I need to stop sharing this. Bam. And maybe launch this poll, which I do need to share. I don't know. Can you all see it? Yay, nay?
No.
Not yet.
Okay, well, hopefully it'll show up. Okay, so let me, I have to go back to sharing.
I can see it now.
Oh, you can?
Yes.
Awesome. Oh, you all are filling it out. You are so good. Thank you to all of you who know much more about these polls than I do. So the question is the infrastructure. Which model does your state or your community utilize? And if there are other models that aren't listed up there, if you don't care to just stick them in the chat box, that would be appreciated. So about half of you have completed it. Okay. It's like 62% of us are actually participating in this. So I so appreciate y'all's willingness to do this. Just a few more people and we'll look at it. Well, it doesn't look like it's being very cooperative. I'm so sorry, Melissa. I think in this past couple of years, I've learned more about what can go wrong with Zoom than what I can do with it. So we've had about 47% of you all. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And I'm going to share the results, if it'll let me. So it looks like 42% of the people who have answered the question about the infrastructure are saying that the family organization or the lived experience organization is the hiring agency. So that's amazing. And so again, I sure want to have some conversations about, are we taking our own temperature as a family organization to see how these things are built in? How are we doing? How are we doing with that? Where do we need to work at some more? And can I be part of your conversation? And then 10% say it's actually a behavioral health service organization who's doing, is the hiring agency. And 35% of you all are saying it comes from several different places that happens. 6% says other community partners are hiring. I will tell you what we have discovered in Kentucky, and then I really welcome your feedback from that. And that is, I don't know if you all can see the PowerPoint now or what you can see, because can you see the PowerPoint? Yes. Okay. Awesome. So I will tell you that based on our experience, there aren't a lot of family orgs out there. One of the reasons that we started our peer support centers is because we wanted more ground level. Somebody's not seeing the PowerPoint. Let me share again. I'm so sorry. Let me see what I can do. How about that? Are we back? So many people we have said in the state of Kentucky that anyone within the system of care, I think we originally said, anyone within the system of care should employ peer support. What we have learned through the years is maybe not. Maybe not. Unless you have a deliberate infrastructure and that infrastructure really supports peer support, maybe you shouldn't hire one. Maybe you should not hire one. So I would welcome anyone else's thoughts on that. So at this point, I've done a lot of talking. So I don't know how many of us are on here. Michelle, I think you're the person who probably knows best how many people we have, because I see very few people on my screen because I'm sharing my screen. So I want to ask you all, is anything that we've talked about yet today surprise you? I welcome you to unmute yourself and speak.
Hi, good morning or afternoon, Barb. This is Jody. One thing that surprised me was, I think I put it in the chat earlier, I was curious. I thought that the only certification was through National Federation of Families. So this was the first that I heard that you can get certified through a state. So I was curious to know what the difference in certifications are, and if you know how many states have their own certification requirements.
You know, I do not have the answer to that question. The state of Kentucky actually built their certification state level certification, which is approved by our behavioral health, state behavioral health organization, before actually ahead of the national peer provider certification. And in fact, we were in on, KPFC was in on some of those ground level conversations at the Federation about what that could look like and what should be expected and the kind of competencies that we were really talking about, and so on and so forth. I do not know of others. And so if there are others on here or someone who has a knowledge base about how many states have one. In Kentucky, we have the state one, which in our curriculum had to be approved by the state in order for people to get certification. So it's state certification. We have also included a clause for a waiver in case somebody in Ohio comes down who is certified to look at ways people can be grandfathered in, although that's not been very common. Three of us here in this state have gone on and gotten the national peer support provider certification. So I don't know, are there other people on here who have a state certification besides myself? And
in Ohio, we are in the later phases of that model that you have in Kentucky, with NAMI providing the training, and at Children's, it will be a requirement that people go through that training. And then there's a component of training, other training required by the state, or there could be for the agency that's hiring you as well. Ours is currently held up in legislation to have a formal certification.
okay,
In order to bill, but we've been
for
trained by
billing
NAMI. We
purposes.
consider ourselves certified.
right, right, yeah. So one of the notions that we had here in the state of Kentucky that I will share with you is that, and we've been a little bit nervous about this, but we have made some movement in this direction, is to create a body of accountability for peer support. You know, a lot of other credentialed providers have a board, if you will. And we don't have anything like that in the state of Kentucky. And so we at KPFC were really thinking about, we would like to maybe take some leadership in developing some sort of a registry or a body that might, and we welcome conversations for this too, about how to ensure the credibility of this position, but also some statewide accountability for this position.
What you saying?
So
What?
I think they're talking to somebody else. So that's one of the things that we've been toying with here in Kentucky. Because the accountability really should be equal
What
to
about her? She said she looked the same.
approval for peer support. So so we've been studying about that. Right now in the state of Kentucky, we're in flux again. You know, we go through these periods of resting in flux, and we're in that flux period where it looks like the state, well, in fact, they have put out some RFPs. All of our curriculum was based on face-to-face. It was very, it was 5-day training, and folks had to be physically present for that training. And currently the state has put out an RFP for someone to create the curriculum or recreate the curriculum where, I mean, we have different kinds of peer support in Kentucky. We have substance use, we have youth, we have adult, we have family. So, you know, there are all these specialties, if you will, that are out there that people got. And KPFC has actually put in a bid to create the curriculum that's a core curriculum that could be done partly asynchronous and partly synchronous, so that the core and then some specialties could be added to that. Right now, the way it stands is there is a rubric for peer support curriculums, and then that you submit a curriculum to the state, and they will determine whether or not they will approve of your certification curriculum. KPFC was the first to create a family and youth peer support curriculum. There was an existing adult one. In part, that rubric was originally created when it went out to other folks to model very closely to what we at KPFC did. As time went on, that rubric has evolved and changed some. And so we ourselves had to recreate a curriculum to meet the new rubric that was established. So it, you know, it has evolved over the years, and people have differences in opinion about integrity and quality control and so on and so forth. But what we know is that if the curriculum is not done with integrity, not just peer support suffers, but our lived experience movement suffers for that. And so, so we're back in flux again. So now we've written this new, we've submitted a bid at KPFC for, to develop this curriculum, if you will, and which includes family and youth peer support, supervisors training, and a train the trainer of those things. So we shall see. What about other places? Victoria, is your hand up, or just will it not go down?
I was just putting something in the chat box. That hand just stays hanging there. I raised it once.
Okay. So if you go in, this I know because that's happened to me. If you go in and click on raise hand again, that'll go away. Just, or it did for me. I don't know if that'll work for you or not. So
I've never even seen anything to raise a hand.
It's
really?
over the three
I
dots
think
to
it
the
says-
side.
It's
More,
called
and then
something. What is it called?
you can raise hand.
If it's
I
on
didn't
Zoom, it's reactions. It's got-
Reactions on Zoom
Yeah.
is what that's called. Thank
I
you.
don't know
I
what it
didn't
is on Hoover though.
I didn't realize there was also an option to lower hand. So thank you for letting me know about that.
That's okay. You know, I learned that by virtue of people continuing to call on me because they think thought I had my hand raised. So, any other thoughts at this point? Well, then let's move ahead. So, okay, so we have another 15 minutes built in. I think if it's okay with you all, maybe we can push forward just a little bit. And then we will actually give that other 15-minute break, because sitting all day and this isn't your only session. And so we want to honor giving you some time. So, okay. Here's what we think some key elements. And looking at the models might look like. Okay, it should include from a leadership perspective, there has to be some pretty clear vision and priorities. And there would need to be some cohesiveness in a team of leaders that would work to create this infrastructure that we're talking about. And for the decision making, clear roles and accountability. So who are you accountable for those decisions that you're making? And how are you accountable? What does that look like? And how could your agency or organization, or how should it, the structure of it, look to really accommodate a good infrastructure for peer support? What does the development of the people look like? What skills do you need as a co-creator to really create an infrastructure? And how do those performances get measured? How does that happen? And what's the incentives that we're really looking at to really inlay that needs to be built into this infrastructure? And then, of course, the execution of programmatic work. What are those processes? Who's in charge of them? What happens to them? How do they get evaluated? How do we create effective and efficient support processes for peer support? And then, of course, you know, just because I'm saying it last doesn't mean that it's less important than anything else. What is our capacity? What is truly our capacity to build an infrastructure? What are those performance values that we hold dear? We need to name them and claim them somehow. What are those? And what sort of behaviors are we really looking for? And how clearly are those defined? And how clearly is this communicated? Okay, so here are some models. Okay, and it's sort of a comparison, and it's just based on our experience. And so if you look at these different models that are currently out there, I think let's look at in terms of the leadership of those models. So like the behavioral health organizations, I think, although that's big, hang on just one moment, sorry. Yeah, so like within a behavioral health service organization, that leadership really is shaped by maybe a health administrator of some sort, clinical experience, pretty highly degreed leadership. That decision-making structure is really, you know, folks who may be team-based, but put together by maybe the CEO. And the CEO generally makes decisions based on feedback that they get from program administrators. And the vision is really established in the business plan. The business plan includes the vision. For the people involved, their specialty and degree, it really is based on the traditional medical model of role and salary hierarchy and that often being based on a degree. And then, of course, there is generally a career ladder utilized for the degreed staff. Again, it's a medical model. It's typically kind of a top-down model. Policies, procedures, and supervision are very aligned with regulations and deliverables. So all purse strings have deliverables. You have to do X, Y, and Z. And that is oftentimes what guides what happens. Now I'm going to say this to you also, but now we're going to talk about culture. And I said earlier, and I will say again, I come from the culture of poverty. And right or wrong, we sometimes look at things a little bit differently. I know I do. But if I were being honest, I would say I'm kind of a collection of hidden rules that I operate by from both middle class and the culture of poverty, depending on my experiences and my values. But what we know is that the behavioral health service organizations are primarily based on middle class hidden rules and expectations. I assert no criticism. I am just saying that that seems to be the reality. And I think that's why, again, when we're talking about these hidden rules of that sort of a culture, why folks get real tore up, because it's based on a business model. When us families or us youth or us customers don't show up on time for our appointment. Because they look at that very differently. They look at that as a sign of disrespect for their time. And I get it. But if you're operating on a different hidden rule, some things supersede those expectations. And that's a whole other training, which I would love to have a conversation with you about. But just understand that being on time, showing up for your appointments, being compliant in your treatment or your recovery and all that, that's all based on middle class hidden rules. Okay. Which is not necessarily, I mean, they're locked into that. Those are the rules and they're locked into that. And it's not that they like them or dislike them, but that model is based on that. So looking at child and family partner organizations, they're really, rather than a health administrator, it's a specialized field-based organization. Again, that leadership is degreed leadership. And they have an executive director, a board, or maybe even a commissioner. And those are the people who make those high-level decisions. And so for DCBS, and I'm not picking on them, I'm using them as an example. So the commissioner who makes state-level decisions for DCBS that affect people down here on the ground who are both giving and receiving services, their direction comes from the top. Okay. And that creation, their vision is created by their values. And they have a specialty, they have a degree, generally, a specialty degree. They do have a very substantial role and salary hierarchy based on experience and skills. And they have a career ladder that's utilized for that degreed staff. It's a social services, like I said, a social services model. It is very, it is often top down. Policies, procedures, and supervision are aligned with regulation and organizational requirements from the top. And they operate on that, some of those same hidden rules as a behavioral health service organization. Now, what looks a little bit different is, let's look at the lived experience organization, who might be family or customer run. Their leadership is focused on lived experience. And that is generally customers or family of customers who have received services. The decision-making in that realm is like a board of directors that makes decisions based on feedback from their entire staff. There may be more fluidity in the different roles. For example, for KPFC, what that really looks like is we require that 51% of our board members are folks who are raising kids with behavioral health challenges. Over 90% of our staff are there, not because they don't have a degree, some of them do, but they're there not based on their degree, they're there based on their experience. We do a lot of staff level, and we really try to do the ground level. I think one might call it the bubble up theory instead of the trickle down theory. It's kind of a more of a bubble up theory where things get identified from the ground and move up into these other realms. And so the board actually, who is the final decision makers, are hearing it input all the way through. And there are job performance measures that are really based on more of a group process or a self-report or within the context of a staff meeting. Or it could be a shared evaluation with your supervisor. But there are opportunities all throughout that for supervision to both be laid on and challenged. And their career ladder is utilized for all the staff. It's really based on more of a social justice model. A grassroots model that's customer driven. And our policies and our procedures and our supervision, they're all aligned with our organizational vision, mission, and values, which is empowerment, which looks a little different. One of the biggest differences, I think, that sets the family organization or the lived experience organization apart is we seem to have more freedom to modify the rules, or for the customers to really identify what those rules should look like, or what that process should look like, and give feedback regarding that. So I'm seeing that several things are in the chat box, so I don't want to, did I miss anything? Let's see, sorry. Okay, I don't think so. That pertains to this. So although there's some good conversation going on in the chat box. So can you see the different nuances between, let's say, a behavioral health organization and another system of care partner. It's a little bit different. So one is a medical model. One is a social services model. And the other one might be a social justice model. So you can begin to kind of tease out some of the differences in these models. Okay, so we have some of our best thinking going on here that we're going to share with you today. And we're going to do it in a mural, but Carol knows all about that and Barb Greene don't. So we're going to talk about that. But I'm going to give you 15 minutes. I'm going to honor your break, like I said I would before I forget. And when we come back together, we're going to tell you about our best thinking and hopefully hear your best thinking. So what time is it? It's 2:44. So come back at 3 o'clock. And as always, I'll remain, if you all want to talk, I'm here.
How do we join our groups?
I think we're taking a break first.
I think we're breaking first.
I missed that. Thank you.
Go make some coffee or tea, depending upon what part of the world you're in, what part of the nation you're in.
We have about a couple of minutes for folks to join us again. It's 3 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started again. So, Michelle, are you with me? Okay. So I want to share with you for just a moment, and I am a big talker. Always been accused of that, and actually that's very true. And so I want to do this differently. Before, we were going to try to maybe go into some breakout rooms, but I think maybe we could just use the chat box. So I would like for you all to think a little bit about you. We have just looked at some different models for infrastructure, some infrastructure models maybe for a universal peer support infrastructure. And so I want us to think first, looking at the model for the behavioral health service organizations. Please put in some chat box. What do you think are some advantages of utilizing that model for peer support? You're also, please feel free to unmute and speak as well.
I'm a supporter of a sort of an integrated model with not, with more than one sort of pathways, I guess, but I can't say that I'm in favor of the medical model in terms of how behavioral health services are provided. I feel that though bringing our role alongside the clinical providers to help to educate them, to be able to use really some of the skills that in the information that you provided earlier to educate leadership. We do have some buy-in by like where our problem lies is with psychiatry and the nurse NPs, but they need to be educated on our value, our role, and then the bigger picture so that we can integrate. Right now, there's just 2 of us, for crying out loud, but it needs to be integrated all the way in, crisis services, inpatient services, outpatient, everything, community-based, everywhere, so that we can influence the medical model to start making change as new young clinicians come on board, to be able to have, because we are an enormous system. We are enormous, the nationwide children. So if we can be a model for that, that would be great. That would be my pie in the sky dream.
Okay. What about other folks? What are are there some advantages that you have seen by either utilizing the behavioral health service organization or another child serving agency to provide peer support?
In our state in Pennsylvania, if you're with the child family serving organizations, in order to get a family peer support or a support partner, you have to be in several different things. So the disadvantage of that is that you don't help somebody until they're dealing with criminal justice and they're already having behavioral health. The advantages of having a lived experience organization is you can help them no matter where they're at. It could be very minor, but you could be in that position where maybe you're actually stopping them from needing criminal justice. You're stopping them from elevating to those next steps that maybe they don't actually need to be in. And personally, I feel like the first 2 models are very clinical in how they treat parents and how they talk to them and how they help them. With lived experience, it's more personal. It is different than that clinical approach. It is very down to earth and very understanding of what that parent is going through.
Yes.
So I think you mentioned something that I'd really like to hit on, and that is being able to utilize peer support as a prevention service, as opposed to a later service. And oftentimes what I have heard from families is that they bump into peer support by virtue of bumping into, excuse me, by virtue of bumping into a forced choice service, if you will, for whatever reason.
I don't know about other, maybe when we're speaking of adult peer support, but not in my experience in children's. If that's
Okay.
going on, oh my gosh. Does that happen in your state?
That was my experience.
Wow.
I had never dealt with DCBS or anything except for the one time that I ended up losing my kids over. I was court ordered to go in the first place I went. And keep in mind, like, I had no knowledge of like recovery or support or anything out there. I mean, I worked as a nurse, but I didn't know anything about recovery on that end. So I was court ordered to go because of drinking and driving charges and some issues with my care at home and neglect. And the first place I went, like, they put me in a room with foster parents and like new parents that were just being proactive, wanting to learn how to change diapers and feed babies, I guess. I got nothing from that. Like, it wasn't directed at my needs. It wasn't directed at my parenting or anything I could relate to or grow from. You know, like, I've been changing diapers since I was in grade school.
Yes, we see that as well. And we work to help the parent to really communicate those needs and to advocate for what they need.
But if they don't
at the
know,
get-go, at referral, at time of referral. But yes,
that's
you're
not
right. If they
assessed.
come in through the court system, and my thought process and perspective, of course, is skewed toward my work environment and the nature of that. So I know that it meant so many other areas across the country. I mean, we have, it's a double-edged sword, but we have somewhat of an advantage that we have this huge pavilion and an emergency room dedicated just to pediatric mental health. And people who are, maybe the kid says something at school that's, questionable. Oh, take them in for an assessment. So they come in for the assessment and we can be there, right when they've come in. That's the ideal. We haven't built our program up enough to be able to do that, and then help guide them toward parent support in the community, toward NAMI, toward the Federation, toward wherever it's being offered.
I think there needs to be a lot more awareness of resources and awareness. Like, I didn't think, 10 years ago, I didn't think I had mental health concerns, but after receiving treatment and learning more about like myself and mental health, I realized I've had issues with boundaries my whole life. And that's how I got where I was unhealthy boundaries and choices I made. But until I was 30-some and forced into treatment, I never had any knowledge that was an issue. Mm-hmm. So we assume that people have an understanding of things that they don't. I'm sorry, my voice is going out. We assume that they understand things that they don't understand, and we don't properly assess to even find out how to really meet them where they are, and they fall in the gaps.
Is it Jody? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of input. I'm after hearing this, I think it's been a great information session. So thank you so much. I'm feeling pretty thankful. I am a parent partner here in Hawaii, And I work for a child and family organization, but we are referred by the Department of Health, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Division. So we do work with a team, with clinical directors and care coordinators and intensive in-home therapists. And we are placed in the Department of Health's Family Guidance Centers. So our presence is there. We get to build rapport with the care coordinators, and then from there, we get the referrals from them. So I see a lot of advantages where we are. It doesn't sound like in every state that's necessarily the case, but I think that the organization that we have coming from both the behavioral health side from the state of Hawaii, and then also our organization and the leadership that we have in our organization, I think it works really well.
Okay. Thank you.
It sounds like you have the wraparound model. Is that what it sounds like, which is something we're working towards?
Yeah. Actually, it's not. It's just the way that they do it. There is a grant. There was a wraparound model that I was part of, and then that grant ended, and then there's a new wraparound model.
Nice.
So yeah, they are trying to get staffing for that one again, and then training. But no, it's just the way that they do it here, which I think is really beneficial. There's another agency that also has youth partners that can be referred to the youth as well. I guess here it's all work. I feel like from my perspective, it's all working.
Yeah. So some of the things that I think I heard you say, and please correct me if I misunderstood, but when you were talking about a new wraparound model, are you talking about the high fidelity wraparound model perhaps they're using over there?
Yeah, it's sort of.
Okay.
I think that they're entitling it like data to wisdom. So
So there is a version of that also in Kentucky. It's called high fidelity wraparound. And it's a kind of a refinement of what used to be called Kentucky Impact Wraparound Services, where it really works more closely and intensively with a family and includes in-home and a certain way that things are done that puts the families, excuse me, in the driver's seat. If you will, around their services here in Kentucky. I have one more slide that I'd like to put up right quick. And that one is this one. So this is our model at Kentucky Partnership for Families and Children. And we are the lived experience, statewide lived experience organization. And so some of the things you see in the middle column there are really carved out of the slide that I showed you before. But we went a step further with that. And I don't know if other people have or not, but we created a peer support center model. And those are, that model really looks at support personal and professional growth of customers. Part of it is designed to support that growth of customers and to begin to really identify some emerging leaders. It also is, at least in practice for us, staying true or having some cultural humility on the ground of some of the things that we had talked about earlier around, how people decide to get services. Is it something they seek out, or is it a forced choice, or what is that, it is the people who run those centers are peer support specialists. We have created a more formalized leadership strategy around that and provide coaching and supervision based on that. And we have created this in collaboration with some of our community partners. And so they're actually employed by the family organization, but we have included the system of care partners in really thinking about what it should look like, what it should be doing, what are some of those questions that that I had referred to earlier. They are kind of the initial folks that we hired to do that, which we hired 2 people per place so that there is some shared decision making and shared leadership. And those folks will become regional coaches across the state. And then we also have put together an advisory council for each peer support center, which will include 51% people with lived experience and 49% partners in practice. And that we recently in Kentucky got a System of Care 5. 5 stands for Families Involved, Valued, and Empowered grant here in the state of Kentucky, which has kind of allowed us to not have to bill for services through Medicaid. And so for us to explore what is peer support in its purest form and how does that make sense and how can we move it closer and closer to the prevention phase instead of a reactive phase to what's happening with families. And in that we have regional grant management implementation teams, which really act as our advisory council. We have 6 of them across the state, and they are located in, the geographies are located in is DCBS geographies. And who we are in our prevention phase, really trying to target the most, our highest priority, are those families who, with just some peer support, just some support of some sort, could actually remain intact. I don't know what you know, but Kentucky is one of the highest in terms of families who are separated and children who are going into foster care or who are being adopted. So families who are disbanded for whatever reason by whoever's choice. And we have deliberately trying to structure in career ladder supports that creates an upward movement to the place of to the point of having peer support directors in each one of those regions who grow and fertilize, if you will, leadership among folks with lived experience, and that they actually get coaching from from Kentucky Partnership for Families Children organizational administration. At this point in Kentucky, what that really is kind of looks like at this point, I don't know if I said it when we started, but currently I serve as the associate director for KPFC. The director, our executive director, is not with us today because she had a family death, and so she's not with us today. And then one of my key roles within our agency, within our organization, is really to give direction to these peer support centers out around the state. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. We're doing a grand experiment in Kentucky, if you will, and around what would it look like if a family organization really hired, coached, supervised, grew this leadership, and have partners, our community partners or other agencies truly partnered with us for things like, oh, I don't know, space, X amount of dollars for services, and so on and so forth, instead of the clinical model of billing Medicaid necessarily for services. And how does that truly, of course, the bottom line for us, and I know everybody here actually, is what would most benefit families? And so we're on a grand experiment here in Kentucky. Stay tuned for how it begins to shape and what it looks like. We're collecting some really good, what we think data is, and trying to track some trends and some patterns based on that. If there are others in this group or that you know of who are also doing this, who may be further along or would like to collaborate with us on this notion of having a more universal infrastructure for peer support, boy, we would sure love to hear from you. I would love to collaborate with you around what makes the most sense for families and youth. This is my contact information. And then we have a Facebook page, which we of course invite you to visit. And then our existing website that we have. Please feel free to reach out to me or to our website or our Facebook page. And I hope that this is just a beginning conversation around what are the possibilities? What do we need to be exploring as folks with lived experience about what makes the most sense? I loved the last lady, and I forgot her name, and so I so apologize, but I loved her notion, and what I saw in my mind when you were talking about what you were trying to create there was the village, where it's kind of a place that people could come to and get what they need instead of people being sent to several different places to get what they needed. I love that idea. And that vision about families having just a place to go through. Down here in Southern Kentucky, we created the first family drop-in center with no notion of even what we were doing. We just said, if we build it, they will come. And lo and behold, they did. And so that's kind of become a model somewhat for our state. So I really love that whole notion where we go to the people in a safe place for the people, rather than asking them to all come to us all the time. And so, thank you all so much for joining this conversation. Totally blown away. It's been an honor just to have this conversation with you all today. And if anybody has any closing remarks, now would be the time.